Well, hi, this is Fake Zappa, also known as Jason T. Ingram. I am here in Florida for my first week here, and it was a nice day today. And nice, I mean 57 degrees, but compared to where I was in Texas, just before the big crisis hit, I am grateful to be here. But if there's one thing I'm ungrateful for, it's the constant treatment that I'm getting in every aspect of my life. Now, I watched a video last night. I was going through my personal YouTube stuff, and I'm always curious to see which videos get the most hits, and it's typically the stupidest stuff. Or in this case, the word naked was in the title because I was at a nudist place and I was in a sauna and I was talking for 25 minutes about my life, and the last 5 minutes or so I was using this newer cell phone that was having a latency problem and a sync problem. But anyways, I didn't even show any naughty bits, but just the fact the word naked was in there, we got that video like over 300 hits, apparently. And people were watching and saying, okay, when am I going to see his dick? When am I going to see his dick? I didn't see his dick. And no comments about what I was saying, because I was talking about... without really even using this term, what it's like to be a professional entertainer and somebody who's suffered recent trauma and chronic illness and who needs attention when it comes to getting help, getting vocational support, and this particular career that I am skilled and experienced at for several years in different areas of creative expression. The currency of my job is having recognition, attention, exposure, and ultimately influence. And this is something that, politicians, preachers, business people, teachers, and all kinds of folks, they get influence as a byproduct of their position that they have. Artists don't necessarily say, well, I'm an artist, of course, unless they happen to be working for some big company that happens to be promoting whatever creative expression they want to do. And that doesn't happen when you get a creative job. If they're paying you and they're hiring you, you do what they want. And that's what I did. And one of the reasons why I became invisible was because having those soul-sucking jobs as a creative person, now, it's not necessarily a bad thing if it leads to a mutual understanding that I'm fulfilling your dream, you fulfill my dream. There's an equality there. And a lot of times, successful artists, that's how it happens. They're recognized in a group. Speaking of Texas, where I was just thinking about, and I don't know the whole experience here, but I did know that an artist from there who calls herself Saint Vincent was in a group called the Polyphonic Spree. And it's sort of like, when you see folks that are recognized in a group doing somebody else's thing, and then they're recognized doing their own thing. And I am in a group, and unfortunately, if I do what they want, or if I do my thing, it's even worse. And especially if I do anything better than them, if I do something worse than them, then it's all just, I get more and more and more invisible. So, the first part of this is I kind of want to just do an intro to invisibility. And then I want to get into a whole bunch of stuff when it comes to the Casandra complex, which is a thing I just learned here just this winter. And I was like, holy shit, that is really weird. And about invisible people. And there was a movie called They'll Love Me After I'm Dead. Well, the thing is, it was already from, Orson Welles or some really famous person made that movie about that. Well, it's like, well, that's not so true when you're already a household name. But at the same time, though, there are some folks who never were recognized until after they died, which is basically, as far as I can tell, and I haven't done a ton of research, but if there was a way to break the curse of Casandra, it's for somebody to kill her. And there are people, not a lot of folks have heard of Nick Drake, but he's a good example of somebody, he's doing, car commercials almost 50 years after he died. And nobody's heard of Nick Drake unless they watch car commercials or a Wes Anderson movie or something like that too. And so it's interesting. Well, it's not interesting. It is surreal. It is bizarre. It's disgusting. It is one of those things we don't talk about, because we don't talk about invisible people because they're invisible. I mean, it's like, hey, let's talk about this guy. You can't see him or hear him. Well, why talk about him? Okay, whatever, never mind. Let's just talk about all these visible people. And then the weird thing is that there's not a lot of talk about making invisible people visible, which I think is also really weird too, because that's the whole purpose of enabling underprivileged artists. And we think it happens. And the reality is, when you talk about artists who are trying to get the main currency of their job, which is getting that exposure, getting that recognition, you'll find that all of us are in the same place unless somebody gets lucky or they get privileged or they're handpicked or they're just conforming to something. And typically these artists are folks that are just happen to be at the right time in the right place. Those are the stories that we hear a lot of, somebody who just got lucky. And you just can't tell an artist to believe in some hocus pocus thing. Like I had somebody tell me recently, well, you know, the moment you don't want it, it'll come to you. And it's like, fuck that. You know, this is coming from a powerful creative force in entertainment that doesn't even recognize how powerful they are. So, a lot of what I'm going to do in this little mini series here about being invisible is just talk about conversations that I have on a weekly basis. Not a week goes by to where I'm confronted with something, and I've already had this happen more than once this week, just when it comes to music. Now, when it comes to making friends, even my love life, when it comes to getting help from businesses, organizations, government, all that kind of stuff. And especially when it comes to business, I find that invisibility is touching every area of my life. And the curse of Casandra, if you don't know, there's a story about Apollo and Casandra, and it's interesting that we hear a lot about the story of Troy and the Trojan horse. Most of the time when you hear the Trojan horse, you don't talk about the woman who was this like consecrated priestess who had this vow of celibacy. Whether she broke it or not, I don't know. But, you know, here's this God. He's like, I'm a God and I want to make love to you. And, you know, most people would be like, yes, wow, that'd be awesome. And she's like, no, I got a job to do and I've made this vow. And not only that, though, you want to give me superpowers and then I'll only get them if we fuck? You know, I don't care if you're a god. That is pretty darn sick, Mr. Apollo, or Apoyo, or whatever he was. I don't care how sexy or divine or what kind of superpowers he had. So he's like, I'm going to give you the gift of prophecy, and then if we don't fuck, I'm going to make you ignore it, and I'm going to give you this thing. So here's the thing is that, yeah, this was a powerful figure, whether he was a deity or whether he was a person that they thought was a deity or whatever. And maybe there wasn't a magic spell. Maybe there was this stuff, you know, when legends get passed down generation after generation, they get really hocus pocus. So who knows what the real story of Apoyo and Casandra was. The principle behind it is we had somebody who was very abusive, very powerful, very demanding. He wanted to own her. And here's the thing is that he knew what her vows were. And that's what an abuser will do. Says, I'm going to give you all this stuff just as long as I make a gesture that I own you. And as long as you do this thing that is going to basically get you to go against your personal moral code and integrity in order for me to give you something for free, then there is a weird relationship going on. And interesting thing about Cassandra's curse is that, I mean, this poor gal was tortured. She could see the future and nobody would listen to her. And so what ended up happening is she lived a miserable, lonely life. And not only that, she had a lot of royalty and stuff like that too, and she was real pretty and all this kind of stuff too. So that would have been a horrible life to be ignored that way, and to have something important to contribute. Now, here's the thing about the curse of invisibility, is a little something I'm calling it at this point, is how to break it and how to get seen, how to get heard. And not only that, though, even if you are seen and heard, sometimes it gets garbled up in people's perception, and their perception is typically skewed and distorted by the system of civilization and society and the imbalance of power. And when it comes to entertainment, things get really weird. I love talking to progressives about shopping at Walmart, because they give me the Walmart discourse about, oh, they're on food stamps and blah, 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 and all this stuff. It's like, oh, really? Okay. And totally in denial of all the other industries and even all the other retail companies that do the same practices. Some of them are even worse. Because they only have low prices. They exploit their employees and they raise their prices. You're talking about most retailers are like that. And so what I'd like to do is, when I get educated people trying to educate me about companies like Walmart exploiting people, I want to ask them about what kind of entertainment they expose themselves, their music, the writing, the news, media, TV, streaming stuff, movies, whatever. And then you go on to all the people who were not allowed to participate in all that stuff, or all the people that did and they were exploited and underpaid, not paid at all. The people that had ideas that contributed to the entertainment that you're watching right now that were not recognized, not compensated, or not compensated fairly. And that would be interesting conversations to have with people who it's like, okay, you watch Netflix? Okay, well, for instance, there was a thing that was written in the Portland, Oregon area. In fact, the little suburb I used to go to. Well, how did those people treat me personally when it came to something that they could have easily just said, yeah, sure. And the snobbery and how exclusive they are and how unwilling they are to share their power. And these are the things that artists go through. And even worse than that, and this is something else that I've been noticing as well, and I'll probably talk more about this, is on a regular basis, when it comes to opportunities to contribute, even without being paid, your skills, your experience, your gifts, your talents, all this kind of stuff, even if you're giving it away. I would say that all the opportunities that I've had to do that have actually had an open door were either illegal scams, which is actually quite rare. And they come and go and poof, and you just really can't do much about them. The trouble that I've seen is with, for instance, talent agents and that kind of stuff like that, is that they're perfectly legal what they're doing. It's just they're exploiting people that either think they're talented or that are talented. And talented people get thrown in line with a bunch of amateurs that, for whatever reason, somebody deceived them into thinking they had something to contribute, or they deceived themselves into thinking they had something to contribute. And you've got millions of voices that are drowning out folks that really do need to be seen and heard. And even if they really don't have much to contribute, if they've suffered, that's the big thing, if they've survived, and they might not have a lot to contribute creatively, it's just their example of suffering, being an underprivileged person, especially when it comes to being invisible, that itself would need to be heard. So anyways, thank you for watching part 1. I will get to part 2, and I will talk about some recent experiences as far as being invisible, what my real job seems to be lately, and exposing non-scam scams. Thank you.